Now it's time for TIPisodes with quick tips you should know. Techniques you can implement into your workflow right here on A Tale, oh yeah, A Tale of Two Hygienists.
All right, welcome back everyone to this week's TIPisode. Today I'm really excited to talk to you about one of my favorite passions in life, which is podcasting. I thought that today I would maybe tell you a little bit about the history of dental podcasts and like where I think it's going to end up going. I know a lot of you guys know my story or our story for A Tale of Two Hygienists, but there's a bigger group at play here. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about today. If you have no interest in podcasts or podcasting or kind of our personal journey or the journey of dental podcasting, maybe this isn't the right TIPisode for you, and that's okay. You don't have to love this the way I love it, but I do love it. It's very nerdy. It's very awesome. And one day I hope that, the nerds take over the world and podcasting becomes really, really cool. But if you are into it, like we are into it, then I think you're really going to love this episode or this TIPisode, which I always start off with it being really short and then it ends up being really, really long. And so I'm not sure how much of a tip or a mini episode this one will end up being. So I'll start off by saying I think it's an interesting path. Actually, let me start off by saying it's funny because as I started to record this, I was thinking, there are podcasters who do these monologue episodes all the time and they love them. And I you guys have obviously noticed a huge change in the way that we do our intros. I have it very kind of matter of fact. It's very like, go, go, go. This is what it is. And then get to the meat. Without a partner, it is very hard talking to a microphone for any sort of amount of time. And my hat's off to the podcasters who do monologue. But anyway, so I want to start off by talking about, it's an interesting path that the way that podcasting has taken in the world, but also in dentistry. This year, actually, we'll be attending ADA. They're going to be doing their inaugural podcast hub, which if you're going to end up being at ADA, it's going to be in Hall B, booth 1403. They have podcasts going Thursday, Friday, Saturday, which is the 13th, 14th, and 15th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. each day. And I really kind of like the way that they have this set up because, instead of having, which we've had at other places, your booth time is going to be for 4 to 5 hours. In this particular case, we only get 1 hour each, and their lineup each day is diverse. It's dentists, it's hygienists, it's dental assistants, it's DSOs, it's industry experts, it's the whole gamut of people. And so it's going to be really good. But anyway, I was saying that it's interesting the path because podcasting has actually been around for almost 20 years. I think it was early 2004 when the first one was published. But after that big bang onto the scene, the medium just kind of sat there for a while. There weren't a whole lot of podcasters, or there wasn't a whole lot of action going on. I think some of the really big names that got into it early, Ricky Gervais, he's a British comedian. He was an early adopter, as was surprisingly President George Bush. Well, actually, I should take that back. His team put up the RSS feed on the website for all of the past presidential addresses. And so that was kind of technically a podcast at the time. And so if you look through those first couple of years, it was really just comedians mostly putting their time into the podcasting effort. There's also a lot of money, which I'm not going to get into that part, but people were investing into podcasting like crazy early on. Then in October 2006, so just a couple years later, This American Life, which I think almost everyone has heard of before, they had a radio show, but they ended up offering it as a podcast. And then 2009, this is when the big names started coming out. The Mark Marons, Adam Carolla, Joe Rogan. There was a show called Comedy Bang Bang. It's actually still going on. And for me, this was really the beginning of podcasting. I for sure wasn't listening at that time, so I don't think that I was. But it's that group of people, along with people like Kevin Smith, who I think started his in 2010, that I think was what really paved the way for me, but also the rest of the world. They were the big names that really got into it and created a lot of content for people to listen to. I won't take you down the memory lane of like technical advances, but to get an RSS feed from MP4 to MP3 and how to capture sound and dispense sound and store sound and all of these things, I'm not going to take you down that way, but there's also a ton of things that happened in this time as well. My wife, Allison, was actually the first one to get me into listening. She is usually the early adopter of the family. And I remember I think it was right when I got back from the Philippines. So that would have been early 2005. I chose to work at a movie store called Hollywood Video in good old Centralia, Washington. I don't think Hollywood Video made it past maybe the Northwest or the West Coast. So think of like Blockbuster. It was very similar, but just more regional, I think. And man, did I love that job. When Alice and I first met, we had this weird work schedule. She was a very early in the morning kind of a person with her work. And I was working really late until like after midnight. Midnight was when it was closed, right? The last drop off of the video. We would close everything down, and then I would drive almost an hour to get home. And so one of the only activities that we consistently had that worked for us was watching movies, or for us, it was TV shows together. Now, Netflix had been around for probably, 5 to 7 years by that time. And she also knew that I worked at a movie store, but she would always bring the next disc of Sports Night or whatever show we were watching to the apartment, and we would watch it together. She was always getting me into the next new thing. So she was getting me into listening to some of these early comedians, not so much the Mark Marons of the 2009s, but closer to the probably 2012 to 2015 with the Chris Hardwicks, the Pete Holmes. And then it was probably really 2014 that I started finding my own stuff. And the same time in 2014, there was a new show that came out called Startup. And it was from a company that would later be known as Gimlet Media. And it follows this guy, Alex, the startup of his podcasting company. I was hooked from the very, very get-go. It talked about everything from pitching the idea of the company to venture capitalists, to conversations with his wife, private conversations with his business partner on the progress of the company, how much money they had. They talked about measuring successes, naming the company. They talked about the mistakes as bosses of a budding company. What mistakes they made with personnel, and they were very, well, it felt at least very real, honest, and transparent. And I remember I was listening to it one day. I was driving up the east side of the Snoqualmie Pass, and I just kept thinking, I got to do this. I really need to start a podcast. But in that area, I didn't get cell reception. So when I got finally to the west side of the mountains, I called up Allison and I told her, like, babe, I got to do this. This is something, I just felt a calling that I need to be doing this. I talked a little bit about the different shows that I wanted to do. I thought about what people would want to hear, especially in dentistry. I thought of all of that, and I just kind of like laid it out for her. And I'm sure that she thought I was pretty nuts at the time, because I'm kind of that guy that does have a lot of ideas, but doesn't always necessarily follow through with them. But it felt right. It felt like this was a thing that could align so many of the things, or the parts of life that I enjoy the most, which is learning about new things, helping others get better at whatever it is that they love, and working with startups. There's an energy about working with a new group who they all just want to do good things. It's really hard to describe, but if you felt it, you know what I'm saying. I think one part too is that I like seeing metrics, and with downloads in podcasting, you have an objective metric, something that is not someone's personal belief or opinion. It is the number of people that are downloading, and this is just what the number is. It feels very fair. And I know I personally have like a real issue when people judge or measure my performance against subjective terms, which has been like historically, I think, in the way of the world, I think a lot of people, a lot of bosses end up using subjective terms. They're not the best bosses in the world when they do that, but it feels like they can kind of lie about me and they just kind of get away with it. It feels a little bit smarmy, but not with podcasting, because the world is going to tell you in very clear terms if this is working out or not. So in dentistry, there were some pretty early adopters, and I'm not sure that I know all of them. It's been actually a long time since I've seen several of them. Dr. Bilal Saib, he had a show before we did, as did, I believe, Dr. David Mullally. I think his might still be going. Gary Takis had one. Dr. Mark Costas was ahead of us as well. I know there's several other ones, and I'm sorry if I've missed them and you happen to be listening to the show. But I think there was one that had the biggest impact on me. And if you've listened to the show for any of the last several years, you know exactly who I'm talking about. It's Dr. Alan Mead and his show, what is now called A Very Dental Podcast, but formerly it was The Dental Hacks. And I could be wrong on this, but I think they started right around 2014. We started in 2015, about a year later, I think. What that show did for dental podcasting was truly amazing, because they were funny, but the show was informational. They were humble. They asked questions in a way that it wasn't like they were angling for something. They truly just wanted to know what the answer was. And I know a lot of people in dentistry can be very arrogant about their information, their knowledge base, and they never really came off as doing that. They also brought on segments, which I thought was just so interesting. And also the transitions for those segments, which was very unique because many of us, as we started out, were editing our own shows at that time. I think that Dr. Mead still probably does edit his own show. And it just takes a lot more time to do all of that, a time that we didn't have because we were all practicing clinicians at the time as well. So their show really raised the bar for dental podcasts. Dr. Mead also started the dental Facebook group, which led to the launch of this show, A Tale of Two Hygienists. And it was, at that time, a pretty incredible group of shows that came from that era. I would say probably 2014 to 2016, maybe, somewhere in there. I know Dr. Howard Ferran started a show not too long after all of that. He did a crazy number of shows. I think he did a daily show or maybe sometimes multiple, I don't know, it was 7 days a week, maybe even. Over the span of several years. So he got a lot of stuff out there really quickly. And I think he has since stopped doing a show. The Voices of Dentistry conference also started early on. I'm sorry, I can't remember. Maybe it was 2017, January 2017. Might have been 2016, but I think it was 2017. And that really became a place for podcasters to meet up, share best practices. There was some really cool equipment that not a lot of us had at the time, but we all kind of came together and talked about equipment and recommended guests or sponsors. Just so many things happened at those conferences. And it became an annual event that was just for us, the closest friends in podcasting. And it was unique and it was nice. I think, we here at Tale of Two Hygienists, but also I know a lot of those people of that same era, we did our best to help the next generation of shows come to fruition. We ourselves, I know that we've launched several shows in collaboration with other people. We've tried to highlight new shows that came on if we knew about them and said, hey, come on our show. We'll talk about you and your show, and hopefully you'll get some audience over there. And it just felt really, really collaborative. But I don't know what happened since then. I mean, I feel like over the last several years, things have definitely changed. Maybe the space got too big. Maybe there's just too many shows. I'm not really sure what happened. I know that some of those key shows also faded away. There were some partnerships that broke up. The newcomers also didn't really reach out to us. They kind of went on their own and did their own thing, which is too bad because I think that so many of them are great shows, but it's hard to recommend them if I don't know about them, if I don't hear about them. So, this is kind of a shameless plug, but if you do know, or if you're listening to another dental hygiene show that you really like, send me an email, Andrew at A Tale of Two Hygienists. I'll definitely put it out there for everyone to hear, or maybe I'll try and get them on the show and give them a spotlight, a leg up if I can. But I guess that kind of brings us back to where I think that podcasts are going. I don't have a crystal ball, obviously, but if you take a look around and see what you're seeing about in every media grouping, so your radio, your TV, your movies, podcasts are everywhere, and they're not going away. Conan O'Brien was a late night comedian who decided to start podcasting after almost 30 years of being on TV. So if that doesn't tell you something, the show that I was talking about earlier, The Startup, or I think it was called just Startup, was made into a TV show called Alex Inc. And then there have been other podcasts, several of them, that have been also made into TV shows or miniseries. All of the sports network shows have podcasts. Your favorite TV series from a while back, like you think about The Office or Friends or some of these kind of iconic TV series, they all have podcasts where it's usually one of the main actors. Actually, I don't know if Friends actually has one, but I assume they do. And one of the main actors, Scrubs was one of them. They take you through each episode for some kind of behind the scenes context. And it's just become really, really popular. I think it's becoming ingrained into the fiber of our society at almost every intersection that we can think of. And podcasting, I think, used to be like dentistry with, you have the community doctors going to hang up their shingle in town and everyone went to that one or two doctors in the area. Then the group dentistry began to take over. And podcasts are like that too. The podcasts that are really big are usually affiliated with a network of other shows. The little podcasts definitely can still make it, but they have to be unique enough to be heard through all that noise. So in dentistry and dental, Dr. Costas, who does, I think, 5 shows a week for the last 7+ years, he has more than 7 million downloads. And Dr. Mead has 5 million downloads with only a few shows each week. And this is dentistry, which kind of wraps us back up to the beginning, where I was talking about the very, very beginning. Starting a few years ago, right before the pandemic, actually, we were approached to be part of a dental conference podcast lounge thing. And they could see the writing on the wall for sure. And we've been a part of Voices of Dentistry every year since it's been held. And we're very thankful, by the way, for the invitation each time, because they definitely don't have to do that. We were just at the Hinman doing the podcast lounge, and we've always done RDH under one roof. We've always had a very warm welcome there and had tons of content come out of there. But now the ADA is hosting their inaugural podcast hub. So that is where I think it's going. It's looking up, it's growing, it's becoming ingrained in dentistry. And speaking of as a podcaster, I couldn't be more thankful for you, the person that's listening to the show. None of this happens without you choosing to download. So thank you so very, very much for your constant and continued support of what we're trying to do here. Thank you also, by the way, for enduring the ads that make all of this possible. I know sometimes it can be a little bit annoying, but it helps us to really continue on as a show. Thank you, by the way, also for those who I've heard kind of like whispers from the sponsors who have reached out to them and said, thank you for supporting the show, or that you've heard them on A Tale of Two Hygienists. That really means a lot to us. I think more than anything else, that is probably one of the biggest things that you can do for us is just reach out to the show sponsors and tell them, hey, I heard you on A Tale of Two Hygienists. Great job. So if you are going to be at the ADA conference in October in Houston, send me an email, Andrew@A-Tale-of-Two-Hygienists, and let me know. I'm hoping to be there, I think, Thursday evening, and then do our thing Friday morning, our thing is Friday morning, October 14th at 11:15 to 12:15. Then I will probably take off that night. So I would surely love to meet you if we can. We can probably plan on, meeting at maybe 12:15 at the podcasting area if you're available. Otherwise, maybe Thursday evening, again, just send me an email and we'll try and meet up. That is all I have on this TIPisode, which I know was not the shortest of them, but I love podcasting. I love what we do here. I think we're doing a lot of really good things for the dental community and for everyone. And I'm really proud to be a part of this. So thank you again. Thank you for listening. Have a great weekend.
A Tale of Two Hygienists.